The evolution of African folk long before ink met paper, or the printing press spun its first wheel. African folktales were already alive, whispered by elders beneath stars-wept skies, sung by griots beside crackling fires, and danced out through rhythms of drums and feet. These oral traditions were the lifeblood of African culture, passed from generation to generation, not just to entertain, but to teach, to preserve history, and to root identity. Every tale was a living being, shaped by tongue and memory, breathing wisdom into communities from the vast savannas of the Sahel to the dense forests of the Congo Basin. In these tales, animals spoke, trees whispered secrets, and tricksters ruled with charm and cunning. Among the most legendary was Anansi the Spider, the clever storyteller from West Africa, particularly the Ashanti of Ghana. But Anansi was not alone. Alongside him crawled a rival just as famous, just as cunning, and perhaps even more dangerous, the Tortoise, known by many names across West Africa, Ijapa among the Yoruba. For instance, the Tortoise was no simple shabeller. He was sly, manipulative, and always scheming. The Tortoise was slow of foot, but swift of mind. He tricked the birds into giving him feathers to fly to the heavens for a feast, only to steal the food and leave them starving. He deceived the king's servants, outwitted entire villages, and nearly always got what he wanted, till of course, his greed or pride caught up with him. His stories warned of selfishness, of consequences, but also praised cleverness in a world where brute strength was not the only path to victory. Together, Anansi and Tortoise represent two pillars of African trickster lore. Anansi with his web of words, and Tortoise with his deliberate schemes. They weren't heroes in the Western sense, but mirrors to humanity, flawed, brilliant, and endlessly entertaining. Their tales taught that wisdom could come from anywhere, even from a creature small, slow, or strange dot, as African tribes moved or were displaced through trade in the brutal chapters of slavery. These stories moved to in the Caribbean, and the America's Anansi became Nancy or Aunt Nancy. Tortoise, too, left his footprint in diaspora tales, sometimes blending into other trickster figures, sometimes emerging in new forms. These folk tales became tools of resistance, cloaked in laughter and rhythm, used to preserve African identity even under the weight of oppression. But back in Africa, folk tales began to shift as well. Colonialism disrupted traditional life languages, were suppressed, and Western education systems dismissed indigenous knowledge systems as primitive. Yet, the stories endured, and like the tortoise, they adapted subtle, quiet, resilient. Lions in the tales no longer just ruled the animal kingdom, they represented tyrants or colonizers. Tricksters like Tortoise became symbols of survival, navigating the cracks of injustice, cleverness as their only weapon. By the 20th century, African writers began to immortalize these tales in written form, preserving them in books, newspapers, and eventually in radio and television. Authors like Chinua Achebe and Amos Tutuola drew on folktale structures and archetypes, blending them into modern African literature. Achebe's own stories were filled with echoes of Tortoise's sharp tongue and Anansi's wit, reminders that the old tales still had something to say in a modern world. Today, African folktales are not only surviving, they're evolving. They live on in animated series, podcasts, and social media. Young African creators are bringing Tortoise and Anansi to TikTok and YouTube, turning them into memes, voiceovers, and commentary on everything from politics to relationships. Afrofuturism reimagines these ancient tricksters in spacesuits and digital dreamscapes. The tortoise is no longer just crawling through the forest. He's navigating algorithms and virtual worlds. Still scheming, still teaching. Even the act of storytelling has transformed. While the village elder around the fire remains sacred, avatars now tell stories online. AI narrators, just like me, give voice to ancient legends. Yet the essence remains. To educate and entertain, to connect. Whether told in Yoruba, Swahili, or English, these stories carry the pulse of Africa. Its struggles, its humor, its wisdom, its soul. At the heart of African folktales is community. These tales were never meant to be owned by one person, but shared, adapted, and reshaped, and in that way, they are timeless. A child in Lagos can hear a tale their ancestors heard centuries ago, laugh at the same clever trick, perhaps learn the same lesson about greed, kindness, courage. Through these stories, the ancestral voices speak not as ghosts of the past, but as guides for the future. So if the avatar you see before you speaks, know that I am part of that tradition, a storyteller, a keeper of tales, and you, the listener, are now part of it too. The evolution of African folktales is not just history, it's happening now. With every click, every share, every story retold in new ways. And so, the tale continues. Subscribe to watch the greatest folklore story ever, narrated in West Africa.